Okay, we are back, and the next 6 questions are pretty much straightforward, so we should be able to blow through them fairly quickly. Let's take a look at number 45. The table above shows the distribution of income in country X in 2010 before and after taxes and transfer payments. Which of the following can be concluded about the effect of the government's tax and transfer policies on income distribution in country X? Okay, so before we look at the choices, let's go ahead and just take a look at the chart and see what the chart's telling us. So if you're in the top 20% of the people, 50.7% of the income was received by the top 20%. Then they put a tax in place, and it's the Robin Hood tax. They steal from the rich, and then they're only left with 43.5. So they're left with pretty much a 14% decrease in income. Right? So it's roughly seven whatever it is. Divided by 50, so they're losing about 14%. And the fourth tier, the fourth richest group, they also go down. They only go down by about 1, so this is only about a decrease of about 4%. And here in the third part, now this is where it changes. The third richest group is actually going up by 1, and that's about 7%. The second poorest group, 7.9 to 11, that's up by about 4 or so that's almost an increase of 50%. So now they're getting a big percentage. And finally, in the lowest group, they're going from 1 to 5. That's an increase of almost 500%. So what the tax doing, it's stealing from the two richest groups, and it's giving to the bottom two groups mostly. And that's a transfer payment, or a tax that's working as a transfer. Okay, so let's look at the choices and see which one makes sense. The distribution of income is significantly less equal after the accounting for the impact of the government policies. So here we go from 1 to 50. That's a much bigger change than 5.1 to 4.3. So it's more equal, not less equal. So that's not correct. The distribution of income is about the same after accounting for the impact of the government. And we can see the distribution of income did change enough to make that incorrect. The largest gain is from the government policy or the third and fourth quintile. And here's the third and fourth quintile, and one gain, one lost. I mean, it's certainly not as big a gain as the lowest quintile, so that's not going to be correct. The only quintile to benefit from the government policy is the lowest quintile, but we could see that the second and third lowest also benefited, so that's not going to be correct. And the last one, the major transfer of income is from the highest quintile to the two lowest quintiles, and we see that that is exactly right. So the answer to this question is E. Okay, number 46. After graduating from high school, Peggy Smith decides to enroll in a 2-year program at a local community college rather than. So you see rather than, you know you have an opportunity cost problem. To accept a job that offered a salary of $12,000 a year, so you know that's going to be an opportunity cost. If the annual tuition and fees are $4,600, the annual opportunity cost of attending the community policy is. So we got to remember that opportunity cost is not only what you lose by doing something, it's also the cost of doing something. So here it's going to be the $12,000 plus the $4,600 for a total of $16,600, and we see that's choice D. So that's the correct answer. Okay, number 47. In which of the following situation is a good not scarce? So we need the definition of scarce. And to be scarce in the economic sense just means that a goods is not freely available. The only thing that you can really say that is not scarce is things like the air we breathe, things that just require no money at all and they're freely available. Those are the things that are not scarce. Anything that you got to pay for is scarce. No matter if you pay a little or a lot, it's still scarce in the economic sense. Okay, let's look at the answers, knowing the definition, and let's see what makes sense. Consumers give up nothing to obtain more of the good. Well, I think we hit the nail on the head with that one, because if you're paying nothing for it, it's certainly not scarce at all. We pay for nothing when we breathe more, so that would be a correct answer, but let's just look at the other ones. Consumers can purchase as much of the good as they want at its current market price. Well, you have to pay for it, so that makes it scarce. Large quantities of the goods are available in the marketplace, but they're available in the marketplace to be paid for or to be purchased, so that doesn't make it scarce. That makes it scarce, so it doesn't meet the condition of not scarce. There is a surplus of the goods at some positive price. Positive price means you have to pay for it. Again, that makes it scarce. And finally, there is a shortage of the good at some positive price, and a shortage makes it even more scarce. You can't even get as much of it, so that's not correct. So here the correct answer is A. Okay, number 48. Suppose that the market supply curve for shoes is upward sloping and the market demand curve is downward sloping. How will the imposition of a sales tax on shoes affect the consumer surplus? Okay, so we've seen this earlier, that the consumer surplus is the area above the price that clears, this area here, filling that in yellow. And the producer surplus is the area under the price curve that clears it down to the supply curve in this area. And we got it filled in green. Now the government comes along and in their infinite wisdom, they put a sales tax on shoes. Now what's going to happen when they put a sales tax on shoes? So the supplier is going to have to increase their cost by the amount of the tax. And what we see is that now the price has gone up, so the consumer is paying a higher price, and the quantity being produced goes down. So now the market's going to have a higher price to the people, and we're not going to be making as much of it. So this triangle here, between what you were making and the old price, this triangle here is called the deadweight cost. And let's see what happens to the consumer surplus. So instead of being the whole yellow triangle, it's now a smaller triangle on top. I put some green lines in here, but you can see the consumer surplus has also diminished. And the producer surplus also goes down. And we have some red lines just indicating the producer surplus. And the total surplus, which is the summation of the consumer surplus and the producer surplus, was this whole triangle here, the bigger triangle on the outside, which was the yellow and the green, and now it's just the striped green and the striped red, which is a smaller area. So the total surplus has gone down. So the government in their infinite wisdom has put a tax on, and the producers suffer and the consumers suffer. The only people who don't suffer are the bureaucrats in Washington. Okay, so let's see what choices make sense. So we see that the consumer surplus decreased, so we know that it is a decreasing consumer surplus. We know that the producer surplus also decreases, and the total surplus decreases. So the choice here will be A. Okay, let's go to number 49. At the current level of consumption, a consumer is willing to pay up to $1.50 for a bottle of water and up to $1,500 for a diamond ring because. I know I see total utility, I see marginal utility, and it's important just before we start is to understand that when we see something that says utility, normally you're thinking of usefulness. But in economics, the word utility means your total satisfaction from consuming a product. So, is a diamond ring useful? Well, it's certainly not useful. I mean, water will keep you alive and a diamond ring won't. But that's not the definition in economics. In economics, it's satisfaction. Okay, so we see here that the consumer is willing to pay something. So when they're willing to pay something for the next item, we're talking about a marginal utility, not a total utility in this place, because you're not looking at how many of all the water and all the diamonds that they've done. That would be a question that's starting to ask about the total utility. They're just saying they're willing to pay this for their next buy, so you know you're looking at a marginal utility problem. Okay, so looking at choice A, we see they're describing the total utility of a diamond ring is greater than the total utility of water. That's not true because we only have information about the marginal utility. B, the total utility of water is less than the marginal utility of diamond rings, and this is mixing up two concepts, so that's also not going to be correct. The marginal utility of a bottle of water is less than the marginal utility of a diamond ring. So in this case, because the consumer is willing to pay much, much more for it, that means their satisfaction of the diamond ring is greater than that of the water, and that would explain why they would pay more. So this is a correct answer. But let's look at the other ones just to make sure. Okay, so this is the opposite. The marginal utility of water, or the satisfaction you get from water, is greater than the satisfaction you get from a diamond ring. And we know that that is not true because they're willing to pay much more for the diamond ring. And finally, consumer is irrational and does not understand the water is more important than diamond. Again, they just throw that in there to try to get people who don't understand what the definition of utility is. So that's not the case, and we know the answer to number 48 is C. 49 is C. Number 50, if a firm's production process exhibits economies of scale, which of the following will occur when the firm's output increases? So when we talk about economies of scale, that means you could make additional product at lower and lower prices. So that would be a situation where you see the marginal cost curve, right? The cost of making the next product goes down. And we know because the marginal cost curve is going down, that means that the average total cost curve also has to be going down. But remember, that's the average total cost curve, not the total cost, right? We're going to see some options here in the answers that they talk about the total costs. Just because you make one product today at $10, and then due to the economies of scale, you could do the next one at $5, the next one at $3, the next one at $2, it still costs you the $2, so your total cost will continue to increase. It's the average total cost that would fall. And I also see here that in the answers that they're talking about it falling in the short run and the long run. You know, in this problem, I think that they would fall in both situations, the short and the long run. So hopefully we won't need that to answer this question. So let's go through the choices and see which one makes sense. So A, its short run average total cost will rise. Well, we said that's not right because the average total cost should fall. Its long run average total cost will rise. So again, we don't expect it to rise at all. Its long run average total cost would fall, and that is exactly right. We would expect the average total cost to fall in the long and short run, but that's okay. And then here they say its short run total cost will fall. The short run total costs are not going to fall, right? Because even though you're making them for less and less of a cost, the total still goes up, so that's not going to be right. And here they just give you the option with the long run total costs falling, and that's also not correct because total costs continue to rise, so the answer for 50 is C.